Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time, way back, to the shadowy, often brutal world of feudal Japan. Imagine, if you will, the soft rustle of silk kimonos, the glint of polished steel, the faint, earthy scent of ancient rice paddies carried on a humid breeze. You're not just an observer tonight, you're there, standing on a dusty road, feeling the weight of expectation press down on your shoulders. You hear the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, shaping metal that might one day, far too soon, shape your destiny. This isn't some romanticized movie where everyone lives happily ever after with a perfectly coiffed topknot. Oh no, you probably won't survive this. Not really. This is the nitty-gritty, the unvarnished reality of what it truly sucked to be a samurai. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, not to your cozy bedroom, but to a sparse, drafty room in a wooden house. The morning light, filtering through paper screens, illuminates dust motes dancing in the air. This isn't a dream. This is your reality. You are, by the sheer luck of your birth, or perhaps unluck, a samurai. From the moment you drew your first breath, your path was laid out for you, rigid and unyielding. There's no opting out, no career change to feudal accountant or rice farmer with good benefits. You were born into a burden, a lineage of expectation and duty that would crush a lesser spirit. Your status as a samurai, while granting you certain privileges, like the right to carry two swords, a katana and a wakizashi, a privilege denied to mere commoners, also came with a colossal weight of responsibility. Think of it like being born into a royal family. But instead of garden parties and corgis, you get endless drills, the constant threat of war, and the nagging fear of displeasing your lord. Every single move you make, every word you utter, reflects not just on you, but on your entire family, your clan, and your lord. One wrong step, one perceived dishonor, and the repercussions could echo for generations. Historians still argue whether this intense societal pressure fostered unparalleled discipline or stifled individual expression to a crippling degree. You're constantly aware of the eyes upon you, not just from your elders or your lord, but from the villagers who look at you with a mixture of awe and terror. After all, you have the right to strike down any commoner who disrespects you, a chilling power known as Kirasute Gomen. While this wasn't an everyday occurrence, the mere existence of such a right kept everyone on edge. Imagine walking around knowing you have the legal right to, well, basically execute someone for looking at you funny. It's a heavy cloak to wear, isn't it? It means you have to be beyond reproach, always embodying the ideal of the samurai, even when you'd rather just kick off your sandals and have a good stretch. No slouching for you. Oh, noble warrior. Every posture, every gesture, is a performance of your station. It's like living in a constant job interview, but the stakes are your life and your family's honor. The pressure cooker is real, folks, and you're simmering right in it. Your mornings don't begin with a leisurely breakfast and a quick scroll through social media. Oh no. From the tender age when most kids are learning to tie their shoes, you began a relentless, almost monastic, training regimen. Imagine waking before dawn, the air still crisp and cold, and immediately launching into hours of grueling physical and mental conditioning. This wasn't about getting swole for beach season. This was about survival. You'd practice your swordsmanship, endlessly repeating the same strikes, parries, and thrusts until your muscles screamed and your hands were raw. It's a bit like learning to play a musical instrument, but instead of a violin, your instrument is a razor-sharp katana, and a wrong note means, well, you get the picture. You'd spend hours with the bakken, a wooden sword, striking imaginary foes, perfecting your footwork, your balance, your breath. Then came the Iai Jutsu, the art of drawing the sword and striking in a single, fluid motion, a move that could mean the difference between life and death in a surprise attack. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on repetitive kata truly prepared samurai for chaotic battle or merely instilled a sense of rigid discipline. But for you, it was simply life and death. Beyond the physical, there was the mental fortitude. You were trained to endure pain without flinching, to face fear without blinking, to embrace death as an honorable outcome. This wasn't just about being tough. It was about cultivating a mindset where personal suffering was secondary to duty. Think of it like being a highly specialized athlete. But your sport is war, and the Olympics are every single day of your life. You'd practice meditation. Not for inner peace, though, that might be a nice side effect if you ever had a moment to actually relax. But to hone your focus, to clear your mind of distractions, and to prepare for the psychological pressures of combat. And it wasn't just about fighting. You were expected to be literate, to study classical Chinese and Japanese texts, calligraphy, and poetry. A true samurai was not just a warrior, but a scholar, a cultured individual. So, after swinging a sword for hours, you'd be hunched over a scroll, trying to decipher complex characters by the dim light of an oil lamp. It's like being forced to take advanced calculus right after running a marathon. Exhausting. Right. And if you think your grades in school were stressful, imagine your calligraphy being judged by your stern, unforgiving sensei. Knowing a poor brushstroke could reflect badly on your discipline. One quirky tidbit: some samurai were also skilled in flower arrangement ikebana and the tea ceremony shanoyu. Not as hobbies, but as ways to cultivate mindfulness and aesthetic appreciation even amidst the harshness of their lives. It's a bit like a modern-day special forces operator being a master baker in their spare time. Unexpected, but surprisingly logical when you consider the need for precision and focus in both. After enduring hours of physical and mental training, your stomach is probably rumbling louder than a sumo wrestler after a long nap. But forget about a hearty, protein-packed breakfast. Your diet as a samurai in feudal Japan was, to put it mildly, often monotonous, insufficient, and prone to seasonal scarcity. You're looking at a whole lot of rice, and more rice, maybe some pickled vegetables if you're lucky. Think about it: no instant ramen, no drive-through sushi, and certainly no artisanal toast with avocado. Your main staple was rice, which was often eaten in large quantities to provide energy, but little else in the way of varied nutrition. Meat was a luxury, largely absent from the diet for religious reasons. Buddhism discouraged the killing of animals, and practical ones. It was expensive to raise livestock for meat. So, no juicy steaks or chicken wings for you. Fish, when available, was a welcome addition, especially for those living near the coast. But inland, it was a rare treat, often dried or salted. You might get some foraged greens or root vegetables, but freshness was fleeting, and preservation methods were rudimentary. Imagine surviving on a meal that consists solely of a bowl of plain rice and a few sad-looking pickled radishes. It's enough to make you miss even the most mediocre school cafeteria lunch. Isn't it? Then there's the problem of seasonal scarcity. Winters could be brutal, with food supplies dwindling rapidly. Crop failures due to typhoons or droughts meant widespread famine. And, as a samurai, while you might be slightly better off than a commoner, you weren't immune. Your stipend, often paid in rice, could become worth less during times of scarcity, further tightening your belt. Historians still argue whether the limited diet contributed to the stoicism of samurai or simply made them perpetually hangry. One quirky tidbit is that some samurai, particularly those on campaign, would carry hoshi-e, dried rice that could be rehydrated with hot water. It's basically the ancient Japanese equivalent of military MREs, but probably a lot less appetizing and with fewer flavor options. You're not getting a side of reconstituted mashed potatoes with that. So, while everyone today is talking about their balanced macros and their gluten-free diets, you're just hoping there's enough rice to fill your bowl, and you definitely won't be complaining about the lack of artisanal coffee options. The biggest luxury would be a bit of salt, or maybe some miso paste. Your palate is, by necessity, incredibly humble. Every meal is a reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present threat of hunger. even for a warrior. After that humble meal, it's time to face another less than glamorous aspect of feudal samurai life hygiene. Forget your hot showers, your scented soaps, and your triple-action toothpaste. You're living in a world where personal cleanliness is a constant battle against the elements and the sheer lack of modern conveniences. Imagine trying to stay clean when your only options are cold water, a rudimentary basin, and perhaps some ashes for abrasive cleaning. It's like being perpetually on a camping trip, but without the benefit of a clean, well-stocked bathroom nearby. Your mornings might involve a quick splash of cold water on your face, a brisk wipe down, but a proper bath. That's a luxury, not a daily ritual. Most people, samurai included, would bathe infrequently, perhaps once a week if facilities allowed, or even less during campaigns or harsh winters. When you do bathe, it's likely in a communal bathhouse or a wooden tub, with water that's been heated over a fire, a laborious process. And forget about privacy. That's another modern concept. It's like going to the gym and realizing everyone shares one giant, lukewarm tub. Not exactly spa-like, is it? Then there's the constant threat of disease. Without proper sanitation, waste disposal, and understanding of germ theory, even a minor cut could turn deadly. Open sewers, contaminated water sources, and close living quarters were breeding grounds for everything from dysentery to smallpox. One quirky tidbit: some samurai, particularly those in higher ranks, might use a small amount of incense to mask body odor, or even carry tiny pouches of dried herbs for a similar effect. It's the feudal equivalent of dabbing on a little emergency cologne before a big meeting. Dental hygiene was practically non-existent. You might rub your teeth with a twig or salt, but certainly no fluoride or fancy electric toothbrushes. Cavities, toothaches, and gum disease were just accepted parts of life. Adding to the constant discomfort, historians still argue whether the widespread health issues faced by samurai impacted their average lifespan more than battlefield casualties. You're constantly living with the nagging fear of illness, knowing that a simple fever could quickly escalate into something fatal. With no antibiotics or even basic pain relievers to ease your suffering, it's enough to make you truly appreciate the wonders of modern medicine. Isn't it? Even the common cold feels like a major setback when there's no lemsip in sight. So, you're hungry, possibly a bit stinky. And now we come to the most invisible, yet pervasive, burden of being a samurai: emotional repression. Forget about expressing your feelings, seeking therapy, or even having a good cry when things get tough. As a samurai, you were expected to be a pillar of stoicism, an unshakable rock in the face of adversity, grief, or even joy. Your societal role demanded strict emotional control, a kind of internal discipline that was just as rigorous as your physical training. Imagine carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, but being forbidden to even sigh heavily. From a young age, you were taught to suppress all outward signs of emotion. Fear was weakness, sorrow was indulgence, and even extreme joy was to be tempered. This wasn't just about maintaining an intimidating presence on the battlefield. It was about embodying the ideal of the samurai, a person whose inner world was completely under their control. When a comrade fell in battle, you couldn't openly mourn. You had to maintain your composure, your focus on the task at hand. When a family member died, your grief was a private, solitary burden, rarely, if ever, shared. It's like being trapped in a permanent poker face, even when your internal monologue is screaming. This constant suppression of emotion could, and often did, take a heavy toll. Think about the cumulative stress of never being able to truly express yourself, of always having to project an image of unwavering strength. It's like holding your breath for your entire life, waiting for a moment that never comes. Historians still argue whether this emotional repression led to a greater sense of inner peace or a deeper, more profound form of psychological suffering. One quirky tidbit is that some samurai would write death poems jisei as a final, often stoic, expression of their feelings just before committing seppuku. It was one of the few socially acceptable outlets for deep personal reflection, albeit under the most extreme circumstances. You were expected to face death, both your own and that of your loved ones, with equanimity, Tears were unmanly, signs of weakness that could dishonor your family. Imagine losing someone dear to you and having to bite back every sob, every tremor, presenting a calm, composed front to the world. It's an emotional straitjacket, isn't it? Every time you felt a surge of anger, sadness, or even passionate joy, you had to rein it in, push it deep down, and plaster on that neutral. Warrior's expression, this relentless internal battle was perhaps one of the most draining aspects of your existence. A quiet, unseen suffering that no amount of sword practice could alleviate. You are, in essence, a walking, breathing monument to self-control. And sometimes, you just wish you could scream into a pillow. But even pillows judge. All these personal hardships, the grueling training, the meager diet, the questionable hygiene, the suffocating emotional repression, funnel into the absolute core of your existence the Bushido burden. This wasn't just a suggestion, it was a rigid, unwritten, yet absolutely unbreakable code that dictated every single aspect of your life and, more importantly, your death. Imagine a rulebook for living, but if you even skimmed a chapter, you could be risking your entire family's honor. Bushido, often translated as the way of the warrior, was a complex philosophical and ethical framework that emphasized virtues like rectitude, justice, courage, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. Sounds nice on paper, right? Like a self-help book for medieval warriors. But in practice, it was an incredibly demanding, often unforgiving master. Your entire identity was wrapped up in adhering to these principles, even when they seemed contradictory or impossible to uphold. Loyalty, for instance, was paramount. Your allegiance to your lord was absolute, superseding family ties, personal desires, and even self-preservation. If your lord commanded you to march into a suicidal battle, you did so without question, considering it your utmost honor. If he made a questionable decision, your duty was to serve, not to criticize. It's like being eternally stuck in a customer service role where the customer is always right means the difference between life and death. One wrong look, one hint of insubordination, and your honor, and potentially your life, could be forfeit. Then there's honor. This wasn't just about personal reputation. It was a deeply ingrained concept that affected your entire clan. Any perceived stain on your honor, a defeat in battle, a lapse in judgment, even an accidental disrespect, could only be cleansed through ritual suicide. Seppuku. Imagine living with the constant awareness that your stomach might be your ultimate escape route. Historians still argue whether Bushido was primarily a genuine ethical system or a means of social control to maintain the feudal hierarchy. One quirky tidbit, the emphasis on aesthetics and poetry, which you learned in your training, was also part of Bushido, encouraging the warrior to be not just brutal, but also refined, appreciating beauty even in the face of death. It's like your drill sergeant also expected you to be a connoisseur of fine art. The code dictated your conduct in battle. You fought fair, faced your enemies directly, and showed no fear. It dictated your conduct in peace. You were humble, polite, and always aware of your place. It dictated your appearance, your speech, even the way you walked. You are, effectively, a living embodiment of this ancient, unyielding philosophy. And every moment is a test. The pressure is immense, a constant, crushing weight that reminds you that you are never truly your own. You've embraced the Bushido, your entire being dedicated to duty and honor. But that dedication doesn't exactly pay the bills for your daily rice. Welcome to the thrilling world of samurai economics, a realm defined by financial instability. Unlike the modern concept of a steady paycheck, your income was often unreliable, largely based on rice stipends, and notoriously prone to fluctuations based on the whims of your lord, the success of the harvest, and the general state of political stability. Imagine your lord, instead of handing you a tidy sum of coins every month, grants you a certain amount of koku, units of rice. A koku was traditionally enough rice to feed one person for a year. Sounds substantial. Right. Well, the problem is, rice is a commodity. Its value fluctuates wildly. A bountiful harvest might mean rice is cheap. effectively devaluing your stipend. A bad harvest, on the other hand, means rice is expensive, but your lord might not be able to provide as much, leaving you scrambling. It's like being paid in stocks, but you have no control over the company, and the stock market is essentially controlled by the weather. Beyond the fluctuating value of your main income, there were the constant expenses. Your armor, your weapons, particularly your katana, which was a sacred and incredibly expensive piece of art and engineering, all required constant maintenance and, occasionally, replacement. Think of it like owning a luxury sports car, but you're always on call for a high-speed chase, and every dent means a costly repair. Then there were the costs of maintaining your household, no matter how humble, and feeding your family. And don't forget the demands of appearances. Even a relatively poor samurai was expected to maintain a certain level of decorum, which often required spending more than they truly had. Historians still argue whether the koku system was deliberately designed to keep samurai dependent on their lords, or if it was simply a practical necessity in a pre-monetary economy. One quirky tidbit: some samurai would supplement their income through various side hustles that wouldn't be seen as beneath their dignity. This could include teaching martial arts, acting as security guards for merchants, or even engaging in a bit of calligraphy or artistic work for pay. It's like a medieval warrior moonlighting as a part-time yoga instructor to make ends meet. Every penny counts when your primary income is literally growing in a field somewhere, subject to the whims of nature. So, while you might look impressive with your 2 swords and stern demeanor, inside, you're probably doing mental arithmetic, trying to figure out if you can afford that new pair of sandals, or if your old ones will last just a little bit longer. So, you're constantly juggling your rice income and the endless expenses. But that's just the minor league compared to the next challenge: political peril. As a samurai, you are inextricably linked to your lord and, by extension, to the shifting, treacherous landscape of feudal Japanese politics. You are constantly navigating alliances that can crumble overnight, power struggles that can erupt into full-blown war, and the ever-present threat of betrayal from within your own ranks. It's like being a permanent player in a high-stakes, deadly game of chess. But every pawn is a person, and the board can spontaneously combust. Feudal Japan was a fragmented land, ruled by various daimyo feudal lords, each vying for more territory, resources, and influence. Your lord might be allied with one powerful clan today, only for political winds to shift. And suddenly, you're facing your former allies on the battlefield tomorrow. Imagine trying to keep track of who's friends with whom when the allegiances change faster than fashion trends. You, as a samurai, are merely a piece in this grand strategic game, expected to execute your lord's will without question, even if it means fighting against former comrades or sacrificing your own interests for his ambitions. Betrayal was a constant, gnawing fear. Vassals might turn on their lords, brothers might turn on brothers, all in the pursuit of power or to avoid annihilation. You had to be constantly vigilant, reading the subtle cues, listening to whispers, and trying to discern who could be trusted. If anyone, one wrong word, one perceived slight, and you could find yourself stripped of your land, your honor, or even your life. Historians still argue whether the endemic political instability in feudal Japan was a result of inherent power vacuums or a strategic choice by powerful clans to maintain control. And let's not forget the sheer unpredictability of it all. A sudden death of a lord, a successful coup, or even a marriage alliance could completely upend your world. Your lands could be confiscated, your family exiled, or you could be forced to become a ronin, a masterless samurai, a fate often worse than death, as it meant a life of wandering, poverty, and dishonor. One quirky tidbit to navigate this treacherous landscape. Some samurai would cultivate a network of informants and spies, not just for their lord, but for their own survival, gathering intelligence on rival clans and potential threats within their own. It's like having to be your own personal CIA analyst, constantly sifting through rumors and whispers for hints of danger. So, while you might dream of peaceful days tending to your garden, the political currents are always swirling beneath your feet, threatening to pull you under at any moment. Amidst all the political intrigue and the ever-present threat of battle, there's one constant in your life: one item more precious than gold: your weapons. Specifically, your swords, especially your katana. This isn't just a tool, it's an extension of your soul, a symbol of your status. And your very life depends on its meticulous care. Imagine owning a priceless antique, but if you don't polish it daily and keep it perfectly sharp, it might literally cost you your head. Weapon maintenance was not a chore, it was a ritual, a sacred duty. Your katana, forged with incredible skill over weeks or months, was a living entity that demanded constant attention. After every use, even just for practice, you would meticulously clean the blade, removing any trace of moisture or oil. Then re-oil it to prevent rust. You'd use special rice paper to wipe it down, followed by a light application of choji oil, a mixture of mineral oil and clove oil, which not only protected the steel but also gave it a subtle, pleasing aroma. It's a bit like giving your car a full detailing every single time you drive it. And if you forget, your life might be on the line. The edge of your katana had to be razor sharp, capable of cutting through silk in midair, or, more importantly, through armor and bone. Sharpening was a specialized art, often left to master polishers, but you were still responsible for ensuring its condition. A dull blade in battle was not just inefficient, it was a death sentence. And it wasn't just the blade, the hilt, the scabbard, the silk wrapping. Every component had to be in perfect order. A loose tsuka handle or a cracked saya scabbard could spell disaster in a confrontation. Historians still argue whether the almost religious reverence for the katana was primarily cultural or a practical acknowledgement of its vital role. One quirky tidbit: some samurai believed their swords had a spirit, or kami, residing within them. They would even name their blades and speak to them. It's like having a very expensive, incredibly sharp pet that you have to groom constantly, and whose mood directly impacts your survival. This profound connection meant that a samurai often felt more attached to his sword than to almost any other possession, perhaps even more than some family members. After all, your sword was the one thing that truly stood between you and a gruesome death. So, while you might be tired, hungry, and stressed, the gleam of your perfectly maintained blade is a constant, quiet reassurance, and a reminder of the endless work required just to stay alive. All that meticulous weapon maintenance, all that rigorous training, all that political tightrope walking, it all funnels down to one terrifying, undeniable reality: the battlefield horrors. Your life as a samurai, at its core, was defined by the very real possibility of brutal, up-close combat, where the stakes were absolute and there was little regard for individual life beyond its utility to your lord. Forget the choreographed duels you see in movies. Actual feudal battles were chaotic, visceral, and horrifyingly messy. Imagine standing on a muddy field, the air thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and iron. The war cries of your comrades and enemies echo in your ears. You see the glint of steel, hear the thud of bodies, and feel the ground tremble beneath you as thousands of men clash. There are no safe distances here, no drone strikes or long-range missiles. You are in the thick of it, wielding your katana, parrying blows, thrusting, cutting, desperately trying to stay alive. It's a terrifying dance of death, where a single misstep or a moment of hesitation means the end. You're not just fighting, you're struggling for survival with every ounce of your being. The reality of battle was often short, brutal engagements, followed by periods of tense waiting, or long, exhausting marches. Casualties were high, not just from direct combat, but also from disease, exposure, and starvation on campaign. There was no extensive medical support, no medevac helicopters. If you were wounded, you hoped your comrades could drag you to a rudimentary field doctor, who might, if you were lucky, stop the bleeding with some herbs and a cauterizing iron. Historians still argue whether the perceived honor in battle truly outweighed the sheer psychological trauma inflicted upon the warriors. One quirky tidbit about battlefield tactics: many samurai would carry small identifying flags, sashimono, on their backs, often bearing their clan crest. This wasn't just for looking cool, it was to help distinguish friend from foe in the swirling chaos of combat, and to track the movements of different units. Imagine trying to fight for your life while also trying to make sure your little backpack flag doesn't get snagged on a tree branch. Talk about multitasking under pressure. And speaking of pressure, capturing enemy heads was a common practice, a gruesome way to prove kills and receive rewards. So, after a particularly nasty skirmish, you might find yourself not just tending to your wounds, but also, well, collecting trophies. It's a stark reminder of the barbarity of the times, a far cry from any romantic notions of chivalry. Even if you survived the terrifying chaos of the battlefield, your struggles were far from over. Now you face the grim reality of wound and illness in feudal Japan. Medical knowledge was rudimentary at best, and hygiene, as we've discussed, was an afterthought. This meant that even a seemingly minor injury could quickly become life-threatening, and common illnesses could lead to severe suffering or an agonizing death. Imagine getting a paper cut and having to worry if it's going to turn into a full-blown, limb-amputating infection. A sword cut, a spear thrust, an arrow wound. These were not neat. Surgical incisions. They were brutal, tearing injuries, often contaminated with dirt, rust, and battlefield grime. Field doctors might use cauterization, burning the wound with a hot iron to stop bleeding, which, while effective in some cases, was excruciatingly painful and often led to further tissue damage. Herbs and poultices were used, some with actual medicinal properties, others based on superstition. There were no antibiotics, no sterile dressings, no pain medication beyond perhaps some rough sake to dull the senses. You just had to grit your teeth and bear it. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rates from battlefield wounds were more due to the severity of the injuries or the primitive medical interventions. And it wasn't just battle injuries. Common diseases like dysentery, smallpox, tuberculosis, and influenza swept through the population with devastating regularity. Your immunity, likely weakened by a poor diet, offered little defense. A bad fever could quickly turn into delirium, and without modern diagnostic tools, your fate was often sealed. One quirky tidbit: some samurai would carry small emergency kits with basic medicinal herbs, a clean cloth, and perhaps some dried plum paste umeboshi, believed to aid digestion and prevent fatigue. It's like a medieval first aid kit, but instead of bandages and antiseptic wipes, you get a glorified snack and some leaves. Think about the constant, gnawing pain that would be your companion after an injury. There's no ibuprofen, no morphine. You just endure. And if an infection set in, as it often did, you'd experience fever, chills, and the gruesome sight of pus-filled wounds, knowing that gangrene and eventual amputation or death were very real possibilities. Amputations, when performed, were barbaric, without anesthesia, and rarely successful in preventing further infection. So, while your sword skill might save you from an enemy, a tiny, invisible bacterium could still bring you to your knees. The warrior spirit could face death, but it couldn't cure a nasty case of the stomach flu. You've somehow survived the battle, battled back the fever, but now you return to the quiet, equally demanding arena of your home life, where family obligations loom large. As a samurai, your existence isn't just about your individual honor. It's intrinsically woven into the fabric of your family's well-being and honor. Every action you take, every success or failure, ripples through your entire lineage, affecting not just your immediate household, but also your ancestors and future generations. Your primary duty, beyond serving your lord, was to ensure the continuity and honor of your family name. This meant producing an heir, ideally a son, to carry on the samurai line. If you were unlucky enough to only have daughters, or no children at all, the pressure to adopt an heir from a related family would be immense. Marriage wasn't about romantic love, it was a strategic alliance. Arranged to benefit your family's standing, consolidate power, or forge political ties. Imagine having your entire romantic future decided for you, based purely on what's best for the family business. Then there's the burden of providing for your family. Remember those unreliable rice stipends. You're not just feeding yourself, you're responsible for your wife, your children, and often elderly parents or other dependents who live in your household. Every lean season, every drop in the value of rice, translates directly into hungry mouths and increased hardship for those you are bound to protect. It's like being the sole provider for a large family. But your income is paid in monopoly money that changes value daily. The concept of honor extended to every member of your family. A misstep by your wife, a rebellious child, or a failure of a relative could bring shame upon your entire household. This meant you had to maintain strict discipline within your home, ensuring everyone adhered to the rigid social norms and upheld the family's reputation. Historians still argue whether the intense focus on family honor fostered stronger communal bonds or created an environment of pervasive anxiety and control. One quirky tidbit: the education of samurai children was incredibly rigorous from an early age, mirroring the father's own training. Sons would learn martial arts, literature, and calligraphy, while daughters were educated in household management, etiquette, and often rudimentary self-defense. It was a holistic education aimed at preparing them for their prescribed roles within society, ensuring the next generation could uphold the family's legacy. So, while you might dream of a quiet evening with your family, the reality is often filled with the weight of responsibility, the constant pressure to maintain an impeccable facade, and the silent prayer that everyone behaves themselves, lest dishonor come knocking. So, you're burdened by family obligations, constantly striving to uphold your honor. But your place in the world is also rigidly defined by the omnipresent reality of social stratification. Feudal Japan operated on a strict hierarchical class system, where your birth determined your standing, your opportunities, and your limitations. And while being a samurai puts you near the top, it still means you're trapped within a very specific, unforgiving box. At the very pinnacle, you have the emperor, often a ceremonial figure, and the shogun, the true military ruler. Below them are the daimyo, the powerful feudal lords you serve. And then, there's you, the samurai, part of the warrior class, which was officially second only to the imperial family and court nobles. Sounds pretty good, right top of the heap. But it's not that simple. Within the samurai class itself, there were layers upon layers of hierarchy, from high-ranking retainers who lived comfortably, to low-ranking foot soldiers who might barely scrape by, sometimes no better off than a wealthy peasant. This rigid system meant limited mobility. If you were born a samurai, you died a samurai. There was virtually no chance of a commoner rising to samurai status, no matter how talented or brave. Conversely, if you fell from grace, or became a ronin, there was little chance of regaining your former standing, effectively trapping you in a downward spiral. It's like a game of chutes and ladders, but the ladders are broken, and the chutes are greased. Your life's trajectory was largely predetermined by the circumstances of your birth, rather than your individual merit or ambition. You couldn't simply decide to become a merchant and make your fortune, even if you had a knack for business. Such an endeavor would be considered beneath your station and bring dishonor upon your family. Merchants, though they might accumulate wealth, were at the bottom of the social hierarchy, considered to produce nothing of value themselves. Farmers, artisans, and then merchants. Imagine a world where making money is considered less honorable than growing rice. Historians still argue whether this rigid class system contributed to societal stability or ultimately stifled innovation and economic growth. One quirky tidbit to visually signify their rank within the samurai class. Individuals often had subtle differences in their clothing, the materials of their armor, or even the type of crest mon they were allowed to display. It was like a medieval dress code with very strict rules, where every detail subtly broadcast your position. So, while you might feel the weight of your honor, you also feel the constraints of your prescribed place, constantly aware of those above you demanding loyalty and those below you expecting leadership, all while silently wishing you could just choose your own path for once. After navigating the complex hierarchies of social stratification, you might hope for some relaxing downtime, a moment to truly unwind. But alas, your dull downtime as a samurai was often constrained by social expectations, strict etiquette, and, as we've noted, your often limited financial resources. Forget wild parties or spontaneous adventures. Your leisure time was more about maintaining decorum than truly kicking back. Your free moments, when they occurred, were often filled with pursuits considered culturally enriching and appropriate for your station. This might include practicing calligraphy, composing haiku poetry, or engaging in the tea ceremony. These were not simply hobbies. They were ways to cultivate discipline, mindfulness, and an appreciation for aesthetics, all considered vital aspects of the samurai ideal. Imagine trying to relax by engaging in another form of highly disciplined activity. It's like your idea of a fun weekend is more homework. While popular culture might depict samurai constantly gambling or visiting geisha houses, for the average, struggling samurai, such luxuries were often out of reach. Gambling was frowned upon, and excessive indulgence could quickly drain your meager funds and bring dishonor. Visiting entertainment districts would be a rare treat, if at all, and only for those with sufficient means. Most of your social interactions would revolve around your clan, your family, or your lord's household, always maintaining proper decorum and respect for rank. There's no casual Friday night out with friends at the local pub. Physical pursuits that weren't directly martial training, like hiking or exploring, were also limited. Your movements were often restricted by the needs of your lord or the general political climate. It wasn't wise to simply wander off when a battle could break out at any moment, or when your presence was required for an important duty. Historians still argue whether the structured nature of samurai downtime contributed to their mental discipline or led to a pervasive sense of boredom and internal restlessness. One quirky tidbit to pass the time. Some samurai would engage in quiet, solitary contemplation, often in their gardens if they were fortunate enough to have one, or simply gazing at the moon. This wasn't just aesthetic appreciation. It was a form of meditation, a way to clear the mind and prepare for future challenges. It's like having staring thoughtfully into space as your primary recreational activity. So, while you might dream of a loud, boisterous gathering, your reality is often one of quiet, almost melancholic reflection, always with the underlying current of duty humming beneath the surface. You're never truly off the clock. So, you've lived a life of rigorous training, scarce food, constant hygiene woes, emotional lockdown, strict codes, financial tightropes, political landmines, relentless weapon care, battlefield horrors, the pain of wounds, weighty family duties, and rigid social boundaries, even in your limited downtime. All of this culminates in one overarching, chilling truth: your life is marked by a pervasive, inescapable, uncertain future. There's no retirement plan, no guaranteed pension, and certainly no comfortable golden years. Your existence is a constant tightrope walk over a chasm of instability. The peace you experience, if any, is always fragile, always temporary. War could erupt at any moment, shattering your quiet routine and plunging you back into the chaos of battle. Your lord could fall from power, leaving you a masterless ronin, facing a life of wandering and poverty, stripped of your honor and purpose. A bad harvest could plunge your family into famine, or a sudden illness could claim your life without warning, leaving your dependents vulnerable. Imagine going to bed every night not knowing if you'll wake up to a new dawn, a new war, or a new tragedy. The ultimate end for a samurai, whether in glorious battle or through ritual suicide, was often a predetermined path. The concept of growing old peacefully in your home was a luxury few could truly count on. Your life was a series of trials, each one potentially your last. There was no comfortable future to save for, no distant horizon of ease. Every day was about navigating the present, fulfilling your duty, and preparing for an end that could come at any moment. Historians still argue whether this constant threat of demise fostered a profound appreciation for life's fleeting beauty or simply instilled a deep, underlying sense of fatalism. One quirky tidbit to punctuate this heavy thought: some samurai, particularly those facing an inevitable end, would compose a final poem, known as a jisei, reflecting on their life and embracing their fate. It was a stoic, beautiful, and often poignant way to mark their departure, a final act of control in a life largely dictated by external forces. It's like writing your own eulogy, but you're still alive when you pen it, knowing you'll be reading it to yourself very, very soon. So, as you lay your head down after another exhausting, uncertain day, you reflect on a life where every sunrise brings not just a new day, but a new test, a new potential end. Your destiny isn't yours to fully command. It belongs to your Lord, to the whims of politics, and to the cruel, beautiful hand of fate. And with that, we gently draw the curtains on our journey through the demanding, often unenviable life of a samurai in feudal Japan. As the last echoes of their struggles fade, you can almost feel the heavy weight of their existence lift from your own shoulders. Take a deep breath, letting go of the ancient dust, the clang of steel, and the pervasive sense of uncertainty. That world, so harsh and unyielding, is now far behind us. Allow your mind to drift, to soften, as you imagine the quiet comfort of your own bed, the familiar sounds of your own home, the pressure to uphold impossible codes, the constant threat of war, the simple longing for a full meal. These are but shadows now, stories whispered in the night. Let them dissolve, like mist at dawn. There's no battlefield here, no harsh lord to serve, only the peaceful quiet of your own space. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, a soft current guiding you toward rest. May your dreams be filled with peace, far removed from the sharp edges of ancient history. End of script. Sweet dreams.